Hi, guys. Welcome to No Culty Vibes. I'm your host, Cassie Marie, a former cult hopper, artist, and content creator. And today I have a very special episode for you, a very intense episode. I am talking to my now friend, Amanda, about her experience with YWAM. If you don't know what YWAM is, it stands for Youth with a Mission, and it's a missionary organization that operates across bases all over the entire world. I have some episodes on my podcast, No Culty Vibes. You can find it wherever you listen to podcasts, where I go a little bit more in depth on the structure of YWAM, how it was founded, where it came from, and some of the more culty aspects of it. I do feel like YWAM is a full-blown harmful cult that not a lot of people are talking about, except for the people that are just trying to share their stories to give informed consent to those who are looking to maybe participate in YWAM. And we're going to talk a lot more about that in this episode today. But Amanda and I connected. I believe she either was referred to me by a friend or heard one of my YWAM podcast episodes. And either way, maybe she just found me on TikTok. I'm not sure. Either way, we connected on Instagram and she shared a lot of information about YWAM with me and began sharing her experience and decided that it was time for her to reclaim her story and she wanted to come on and share her experience with you all. This story is going to be a tough one. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to give all the trigger warnings in a minute. And it's taken a lot for Amanda to be able to share this with us. And she is sharing a very unique experience with YWAM's NIKO bases or NIKO camps. There are a couple that exist in the world. And this is something that I had not heard of very much at all before Amanda told me about it. But from what I've gathered, from what Amanda has told me, and from what I've been able to research about this, NIKO experiences are some of the worst in YWAM. And YWAM has had some pretty horrendous, pretty awful things happen. Amanda is also a therapist and has spent a lot of time healing through what she experienced. So this conversation was really nice and fun to have with someone where it was done through kind of a therapeutic lens in a way. Amanda doesn't analyze her experience through therapy, but I think just having some of that insight to apply to YWAM as a whole was really amazing and really helpful. Amanda was so kind with her time and shared basically her entire YWAM story with me, even though this was kind of the highlights of her experience, not highlights in a good way, just the main points. We did spend a very long time talking to each other. So I have split this episode up into two parts. The first part is going to be Amanda talking about what led up to YWAM and her YWAM experience before NIKO, and then what happened when she was done with NIKO, went back to her original base, and then went home, and what her experience was like at home and what her healing journey was like. And then part 2 is going to be her entire NIKO experience from start to finish. Before we get started and get into the trigger warning so you can decide if you are in the headspace to listen to this episode, I did want to let you guys know that I have a little website where I have made some of my digital art available for purchase. I actually have 2 coloring pages on there right now that you can check out. They're a little cheeky and funny. But coloring is a great kind of like meditative practice. It can really help with anxiety. So be sure to check those out. The link is in the description below. I have some No Culty Vibes digital art pieces available, and there will be more to come. And my original work, like the one right behind me here, is going to be available very shortly as well. So I would appreciate any and all of you, if you're interested, to check it out and let me know what you think. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. I would love to hear feedback, and I'm so excited to share more of what I'm working on when it comes to art and art as a healing practice. So you're about to listen to part 2 of Amanda's story. This is her NIKO story from start to finish. If you have not listened to part 1, go back in the podcast or on YouTube and find Amanda's YWAM story, part 1. I'm going to give you a very big trigger warning for spiritual abuse, suicidal ideation. There are some mentions of animals and animal violence in both of these episodes, and just general difficult, horrifying, undue influence, coercive control content. So please keep that in mind. Tread lightly, take breaks when you listen, skip these episodes altogether. If it's too hard for you, we will be here with other episodes whenever you choose. You know what's best for you. So, again, please take care while listening. So, without further ado, here's Amanda's NIKO experience. Well, can you tell us a little bit about NIKO? Because again, so NIKO also was not doing anything to help anyone anywhere or evangelize.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's NIKO. It's interesting because I'm noticing too, like the time, and we might even have to record another one with more NIKO because NIKO's so insane. But like NIKO, so I'll tell you a bit about NIKO. I'll go into a little bit of my narrative maybe, and we'll see where we go because it's crazy.
Yeah, maybe we should do a whole NIKO episode.
Yeah, we might honestly need
That's
to.
perfect.
But I will. So first of all, to acknowledge that until about a month ago, I couldn't talk about NIKO or process it in any way, shape, or form. Couldn't even think about it without throwing up. And we had been told that we were required to never, ever, ever talk about NIKO again. Weren't allowed to speak of it. Weren't allowed to even speak about it with the people in the group that did it with us. And no one would tell you about NIKO who went before. So there's lots of people that I had known at my base that were like, "Oh my God, you guys have to do NIKO? Good fucking luck." And I'm like, what are we gonna, what's gonna happen? Like, no one can talk about it. You're not allowed. And so I actually, and I don't know because I can't find the documentation, but in my brain, I was convinced that I had like signed or agreed legally to never talk about it. In my brain, it was like and I know that's not the case anymore. It was a covenant to the Lord. Oh, you okay?
Sorry.
No, don't be.
Go ahead.
You all good? Yeah, so I believe that it was a covenant. That's now I've known that it's a covenant to the Lord, but I believe that this is like a legal, like I couldn't actually ever talk about it. So much so that like one day after a therapy appointment, like probably like a year ago when I tried to talk about it, I called my therapist being like, you have to delete anything in your notes that say NIKO. Like I don't, if like I ever emailed you about say the word NIKO, I want it gone. Like it was a spiral of like, I'm gonna ruin my life if I talk about this. And so even me now, as I go talking about it and as I drop into my body, it's like, it feels really empowering to be here and to be able to tell my story and to tell my story about NIKO, not just to be angry and be like, fuck the world, fuck all these people, but actually so that on day one of NIKO, you have to walk into a circle and you have to say, I commit. I commit to being here for 5 days as you walk into the commitment circle. And I don't want anyone else to ever commit to NIKO before knowing what they're committing to. And I want an 18-year-old girl like me in her bunk bed in YWAM Denver to be able to Google NIKO and have my face and my story pop up and them to be able to listen and to be able to choose. And I want anyone who did NIKO and who lives with the horrors of the trauma in their mind but can't talk about it, I want them to listen and know that none of them is crazy. And so that is like, that's the heart. And in that, being able to re-empower myself and claim my space and say, actually, no, they took 8 years from me of thinking that I had to be alone with this and no more. I actually get to show up in the world. I get to share my story. And I don't have to hide the horrors that people did to me for those 5 days.
I just want to, before you start, take a second to honor you in that and hold space for you with that, because I think that it's a really big deal and you've done so much work and so much healing to be able to share this and to be able to talk about it. And I just think it's so honorable that you want people to know and have the informed consent that is removed from them when they think about this and make the decision and look into it, because I didn't realize, I had never heard of NIKO
Yeah.
until you mentioned it to me. And as you're saying this now, I didn't realize how secret it was and how much
Yeah.
coercion and control is used so that nobody has heard of NIKO and knows what it is. And so I just think I think it's a big deal that you're willing to do this and share, so that people
Mm,
who do this can hear your story and know that they are not alone. And I know that's so important for people. And stories like this were important for me as I was
mm,
learning what happened to
yeah.
me and what I had
Totally.
been through. So I just know the impact. And I know you and I are
Hmm.
kind of love festing each other right now, but
Yeah.
I want listeners also to know how big of a deal it is to
Yes.
be, in a way, the first one to publicly talk about this. I don't know that there's anyone else that I've seen, and I've seen a lot of YWAM stories, and I've heard a lot of personal
Yeah.
YWAM stories. So I think that that is really important and so kind-hearted of you to want people to
Mm,
know what is going to happen, or what may happen, or what happened to you,
yeah,
because it might be what happened to them.
exactly. Yes. I just like, I want to acknowledge, I just want to acknowledge, thank you. Like, thanks for creating that space for me. And thank you for paving ahead and telling your own story and other people's stories and like advocating, because this space, I'm telling my story here, Cassie, because you're safe, right? And you've proven to me your safety. And that's a really beautiful thing as well. And so bring on the love fest in these spaces,
Yeah.
because we need safety, and the only
Yeah.
place safety comes from is love. So like,
Yeah.
I think that's so huge. And I think I want to also name that you're right. There is very little accounts of NIKO in the world. I thankfully found, last night I read it again, I'm a part of this like YWAM abuse Facebook group, and there is a human in there that had written one of her blog posts was just about the abuse of NIKO in Paris, actually. And so that might be something to share one day, or I'll send to you one day. But otherwise, yeah, I
Yeah.
can't find anything. I can't. You go looking really hard. All you can find when you Google NIKO is just like lots of bases have like a one paragraph blurb, which I might read to you guys in a minute, explaining what
Yeah.
NIKO is. But that's it. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Um, I too just like want to acknowledge that, yeah, if for time reason you need to wrap up or shift things or anything like that, just let me know. Because there's come hefty information that will come. Um, but so I first, if it's okay, can I just explain what NIKO means and what
Yeah.
the blurb is that they tell you? Okay. So NIKO means, and I have it written here, but in the Greek, it means different in different languages as well. But mainly it means to conquer, to overcome, and I hate this one, but to persevere until the end. Um,
Mm.
and so NIKO was actually founded, yeah, in 1985 in Hawaii. And it was in tangent with something called King's Kids International, which is similar with why it was actually created, because it would train out outreach teams. So they'd send them out into the wilderness of Hawaii to train out outreach teams before they would go in to do outreach. And this line, taking straight off of a website about the history of it, it says, um, outreach teams before they went overseas would be taking them out of their comfort zone and teach them about surrender, so that they would establish better teamwork and servant leadership. And so surrender is insane to remember. Take them out of their comfort zone. So this is all purposeful. We're actually trying to take people out of their comfort zone. And this next line is from actually YWAM Hong Kong's website and their NIKO program, but it was the same on my NIKO website as well for Costa Rica. But it says, you will learn skills vital to working as a team, being a leader, and pushing yourself beyond limits you thought that you would never be able to overcome. As an individual or a group, you will learn to surrender, again, your individual rights,
Mm.
and learn new levels of interdependence on others. The most important aspect, though, is to grow on your complete dependence on God.
Right.
Um, yes. And what I think is so interesting in that is that, first of all, the word surrender, right? If you look at the meaning, it's to, in spirituality, to surrender in spirituality and religion means that a believer completely gives up their own will and subjects his thoughts, ideas, and deeds to the will and teachings of a higher power. It also
Wow.
is similar to submission. And so in YWAM, what they actually believed, though, is that you needed full obedience to leadership because leadership was hearing from God. And
Mm-hmm.
so if leadership was told something, that was have full, oh, are you back?
Sorry.
Don't be
I
all
think
good. It just popped us out.
okay.
Do you see me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's talking about YWAM. Yeah, so the surrender piece and the obedience piece, right? And so if you were surrendering fully to God, it meant you were surrendering actually fully to your leaders as well, and you had to. And so that was a big piece, right, within YWAM. And then also that piece around um yeah, complete obedience, right? And choice, right? So when we were said that we could go to YWAM NIKO and we were going to be doing that, I guess in a sense they said we had a choice, but it wasn't a choice because our outreach leader told us we had to do this. And
Mm-hmm.
it was like, what would you do if you didn't go? Well, you'd get sent home or you'd have to go home and you'd have to pay for your own ticket and you'd end up home. And what were you going to say to your community? Oh, I refuse to do a wilderness like Jesus survival camp because I'm a wimp and a baby. Thanks for your fundraising money, but I'm back. No, that's not going to be sufficient. So,
Right.
right. So you go and
They've already primed you. They've been priming you
to
to not question.
100%
Yeah.
from the beginning. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so I also like, it's interesting, even as I talk about this, I notice in my body a little bit of anxiety maybe as I realize that when I tell this story about NIKO to the general public, this will sound like the most absurd, fucked up cult ever. Okay.
Yeah.
But within my community, within my family structures, within my religious context that I grew up in, that I'm no longer a part of, but still heavily connected to,
Mm-hmm.
the story I'm about to tell will just be like, yeah, that makes sense. What's your problem? Of
Yeah.
course we surrender to God. Of course we test ourselves in that. Like just pull up your boots and your bootstraps and let's go, right? Like get over yourself. And so that's the hard thing too, I think, to sit with is that a lot of my community will be completely unfazed actually as I share
Yeah.
this. So those are them that are still in this and it's going to be like,
Mhm.
what's this dramatic person talking about? But the
Yeah.
other side of the universe, right, that's just general public that doesn't grow up in this place is going to be like, what the fuck were you doing? And so
Yeah.
that's an interesting thing to sit with too, I think.
It is. It is. And I think that's what's interesting. That's an interesting aspect of cults, right? Like we can even be a cult member ourselves or a former cult member and look at other
Mm-hmm.
cults and be like, that's crazy while we're
Yeah.
doing something absolutely insane that everyone else thinks is also very crazy.
Yeah.
Like
Isn't
I feel that way when I tell people that, like I did prophetic ministry. I was essentially
yes.
a Christian psychic. That's like the best way to explain it to the outside
Totally.
world. And people are like, that's
What?
so weird. Like that's so,
Yeah.
but my community that is still enmeshed in it is like, why are you being dramatic about it? Like you're being weird
Hey,
saying it like that. That's not
exactly.
what it is.
That is such an interesting piece to actually acknowledge too, I think, right? It's like, and I love that it's true. Like those prophetic ministries, like actually what's interesting is I'll mention that actually the aspect of the healing sessions that we have at YWAM,
Mhm.
but it is all that. It is like Christian psychics. And now are like, oh, I'm seeing this, I'm doing this, I have this word for you, you're supposed to do this. Oh, I actually just healed your asthma. Oh, I actually just healed your heart condition. Don't you feel it? Don't you know? Right? It's like, oh, yeah, I think what's interesting too to acknowledge actually, which I wanted to say from the very beginning, and I didn't, and I won't really mention names or anything, but the reason I had this big push actually to get on here and tell my story is because a month and a half ago or a month now ago, um, an individual from YWAM Denver was out in Costa Rica and doing NIKO, a 23-year-old, and he died
Mhm.
on the hike on the third day that my own body endured. And so he should have never died. No
Mhm.
one should have ever been doing that program 8 years after I did. And yet they are, and they will continue to do those programs because the rest of the world does not know that he died on NIKO. No one's sharing
Mhm.
that. YWAM's not sharing that. They're sharing that he died on outreach, serving the Lord. But he wasn't serving the Lord, actually. He was being horribly and like maliciously abused for 5 days. And
Yeah.
I think that's also what pushed me here. It's no longer just a like, oh man, lots of trauma for us to live with. It's like, these are children who are just starting their life. And
Mhm.
I don't want anyone to die anymore. And
Yeah.
and I think that's just another interesting piece too with YWAM is that the medical aspect of YWAM is really tricky because they do believe that like full reliance on God means like we don't rely on Western medicine all the time. And so you need
Right.
to trust that God will heal you. And so, if you have a really awful medical condition that might affect your life, if you are trusting in God, you will be healed from that in the week. The Holy Spirit week is the week you would have been healed from that in a healing session. And so you, in theory, shouldn't need any medication anymore. And so, although sometimes it wasn't forced for you to toss your medication out, in theory, it kind of was because they did teach that if you needed your medication, you obviously weren't allowing God to heal you, which means you didn't trust
Right.
in God.
You did it
And so
wrong.
I experienced so many people throwing out medication, getting really sick, people like not
Wow.
having medication. I know of people in Wyoming who were hospitalized for coming off really intense medications that they should have never tossed in the garbage, but were told they had to.
Yeah.
And so that's another piece, right? You're bringing a whole bunch of people into the wilderness. Yeah,
Yeah.
for 5 days, and most of them actually don't have their regular medication with them.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Um,
that's dangerous. And it is so sad and tragic that this person lost their life when
yeah.
they had a treatable, preventable thing that they should have had a rescue inhaler. Did we mention how he died? Do we want to mention
Yeah.
it?
Yeah,
Um,
we
yeah, let's
totally
tell it,
can.
right?
Yeah, I mean, they shared about it. So all the
Mm-hmm.
information I'm about to share, I can share with you because I saw it publicly posted on
Right.
comments. Those comments were then deleted. Um, but those who I know that are still very connected to YM Denver have confirmed all those details.
Right.
And so, yeah,
So, yeah, so he died of an asthma attack on a hike. And
yeah,
as someone who has pretty severe asthma,
yeah,
that is what your rescue inhaler's for. And if you have your rescue inhaler, that should, especially if you have chronic asthma, that's, been a thing for a large part of your life. Like the rescue inhaler would treat that. Like even if you're on a
yes,
hike, even if you're like pushed to your limit, that's what the rescue inhaler is for. And then if you need
yes,
additional treatment, there should have been a way to get help and get to additional treatment. And the rescue inhaler is for exactly that. So to think that, and we don't know
yes.
the details of this person, we don't know that he threw out his medication. We don't know if
Nothing.
he
I know none
had
of that.
an inhaler. But the reality is either he didn't have an inhaler or he was pushed so hard for so long that the rescue inhaler wasn't able to do its job. Like those are the only
Exactly.
to
And
die of asthma.
And what's crazy is that like not they so he died, the asthma attack started, and then he died later of is actually a heart attack was the final thing that so he
Wow.
so he asthma attack and then apparently recovered and
Okay.
then
So maybe he did have, yeah.
continued
But
heading on the hike and then died of a heart
oh,
attack, which is the same thing though. Who
right.
dies of a heart attack at so this individual I won't say their age but very young between the ages of
Right.
20 and 25 who dies of a heart attack between the ages of 20 and 25
Right.
unless there is horrific stress being done to your body
Mm-hmm.
where like so not being able to drink for hours, not sleeping really at night at all, not having adequate warmth when you're trying to sleep, not getting fed, having
Mhm.
insane brainwashing, eating raw chicken that you just butchered with your own two
Oh,
hands the night before. So at what point, right? So even if we want to say, oh, this individual died of a horrible heart attack on this
right.
hike, and it had nothing to do with medication. He was on all his medication. He did everything right. They even had a first aid kit on hand. Like, even if we said all of that, right? It's like
They would have had to have been pushed so far to get to that
so
point.
far.
Mhm.
And so I think that's the piece, right? That like, and I'll definitely go through all the things we did because I have it all written
Yeah.
down every day, every event. And I think that's important for people, but it's like, you don't just die,
Mhm.
at between 20 and 25 years old from a really awful heart attack that came from an asthma
Yeah.
attack if you are safe and being cared well for by leaders and adults.
Right.
Um, so, and also, it's not lost on me that YWAM makes you sign a form before leaving on outreach that if you die on outreach, they will not ship your body back. It's
Yep.
actually like a timeline. If you don't send money or do something within a certain amount of days, they'll just give their body to the authorities and they'll do with it what they will, and you have no control. And so it's also that piece is like,
I've heard that
I
as
know that's
well.
reasonable, right? If I'm like going to a camp and I'm on the zip line, I'm signing that I'm not liable, that they're not liable if I fall and die. I understand that, but I'm not signing my name and saying that if I do die on the ground, that they won't even do anything about my body and they'll just toss it to a coroner and say best of luck. Like, that's not a
Right.
typical form to sign.
No.
Why would
That's
I?
very
Why is it
odd.
such a good chance of me dying that you have to write an
Right.
entire form that says you're not going to do anything with my body if I die? Like,
That makes me think too, like something that you wouldn't think when you're signing it, you're just signing papers, right? Like to go on
exactly.
your mission trip, but
Totally.
to even for them to even have that form means that someone died and something happened to their body. So they now need someone
Yes.
to sign forms saying, well, not our problem in case something happens to
E-
someone's body.
exactly. Right. So
And it's
it's
so
like,
weird. Like who
who
thinks of
does
that?
I? But you don't even think twice about it as an 18-year-old.
Right.
You're like, where's the line? Yeah, okay. If
Yeah.
I die, and at that point, if you die on missions, it's like, that's a beautiful way to go. Who cares what
Yeah.
happens to my body? Because
Yep.
it's just my soul. My soul already be in heaven. I'll be ready to be being celebrated by God for my good work. And so I don't really care about my body anyway. And now I'm
Yeah.
like, I read that with my adult eyes just the other week.
Mhm.
The form I signed, I went, holy fuck. You
Mhm.
sat there and signed that before going on outreach after paying them like 4.5 grand? Like, what the heck?
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so I think it's just, I don't know, it's interesting that that kid who died, well, he's a young adult, but I have multiple pictures of him on my phone, and I purposely look at them every day because I don't ever want to forget what his face looked like. Um, and I don't ever want to lose sight of the life that he could have had if he could have gotten out. And I get that life now. I got out.
Yeah.
I get to heal from trauma now. I get to move forward. I get to work as like a therapist and do experiential like
Mhm.
trauma healing with clients and get to see them transform. He doesn't. And although survivor's guilt is a bitch, and I'm learning how to work with that too, this isn't this guilty survivor's guilt thing. This is actually a way to say, like, I got out and now I'm going to tell my story and continue living because he didn't get out and no one's telling his story. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah. I guess looking at the time, do you want me to start going into?
Yeah, let's if you're okay with it, I'm good. And
I have
yeah,
nowhere to
just give us
be.
kind of like an overview of what you
Okay,
experienced.
great.
Yeah.
Okay. So a few days before you get the packing list, you're very distinctly told, don't pack anything on the list that's not included. And like, okay, I will say that I just want to be clear because I'm not here to like exaggerate or make things up that aren't true, that the list does say that you can bring medication on it, the packing list, but it does say
Yeah.
that if you have any medication, it needs to have your name and it needs to be from the prescription place. It needs to be clearly marked. So no Tylenol or Advil, no melatonin if you took it, um, no like meds that you're not taking on a regular basis. So anything like that's like a PRN. So maybe lorazepam or an Ativan, you can't have that. And um, but in the same way, yes, it's on the sheet that you can bring medication, but they're after doing
Yeah,
all these
but they
healing
have
sessions where it's not
right.
really like you can bring your medication. But and then also acknowledging that I'm just going to share the things that I concretely remember. There's lots of other people's
Yeah.
stories and lots of other people's things from the event. Um, but trauma is crazy and we forget things and we remember different things with different ways. And so I'm just going to share with what I actually had written in my notebook that I wrote out everything that night, Friday, when we got back. Knowing as well that we all have different experiences. And so some people's experiences might be
Mhm.
different on those places. And that's okay as well. And there's also just details that for my own protection, I'm not sharing because I have not gotten to the place where I've emotionally come to terms with that trauma and sat with it. And so it needs to just kind of be stored for myself for a bit. So
Perfect.
you
We
get that
honor you
list,
in
you
all of that.
pack.
So
Oh,
you're
thank
good.
you. I really appreciate that. A lot, actually. I feel like it's kind of the beginning of a journey because I feel like, oh, okay, there'll be lots more space. I don't have to rush it. Like
Yeah.
I get to tell
Yeah.
what feels good in my nervous system now. And because it's my story, I actually get to tell more whenever the hell I
Yeah.
want. And that's such a beautiful thing. So yeah, day one, you get in vans with everyone. I think we had 2 or 3 vans. So it was our little outreach, which I can't remember how many of us there were, maybe 10 maximum or less than that actually. And then the DTS at Costa Rica. So their DTS was just starting and they were having to do this at the beginning of their DTS. And then we were joining them. So a big group of like, I don't know, maybe it was 10, 15 kids that we didn't know, had never really spent time with. And then all of the leaders that were on the NIKO were staff from YWAM Costa Rica. And then one of our outreach leaders happened to be also a NIKO staff that week because he had already done NIKO years before. And you can only staff a NIKO if you've done a NIKO, of course, because you have to be,
Right.
you got to do the thing to be able to inflict the harm that you were harmed with. So
Mhm.
that was already a weird dynamic because our outreach leader ended up being like one of these like dictator NIKO leaders, but he was supposed to be our like dad for the 2 months. So it was already a weird way to start. And then our other leader, which is a dear friend of mine now, probably because we bonded and thought we were going to die for 5 days at the very beginning of our friendship. But she was an outreach leader, but she had to be a student. She had to actually do the 5 days in NIKO like a student. And so that was also a weird dynamic because she's supposed to be like our mom of the group for the 2 months, but now she's literally being tortured with us by her co-leader.
Yeah.
Weird stuff, okay? And so we get all these vans, we're all going down. I cannot remember to this day. There was different times at NIKO where we were allowed to talk or not allowed to talk. And I can't remember if we were allowed to talk in the van. There's also different times in NIKO where we were blindfolded. And I can't remember if in the vans we were or not. I can't remember if we knew where we like could see where we were going or not. So I can't remember. But what is
Mhm.
interesting is they would not tell us where we were going and what it was going to be like or anything like that, because that's one of the main pieces of YWAM is learning how to have zero control over anything, because we're not allowed to have control of our lives. God has the full control. And so we need to learn to have no control. And so you don't know where you're going. We finally get to that spot. You have just your backpack on, like a backpacking backpack, and we are dropped off at this like random, what looked like an abandoned farm. Um, and then we were told to walk up a large hill all together, and we walked and we got to this other little like hut slash house place. So we're in the middle of like the Costa Rican, I wouldn't actually say jungle, sorry, I'd say Costa Rican mountains. Um,
Mhm.
and you can think it's like super middle of nowhere, middle of nowhere. The only places that are around are like random farms on the like hillside. Um, or random little huts in random places that people have maybe lived, but incredibly rural. It's not like you're nowhere near where basic needs could be met. Let's just say that.
Right.
And so then they tell us that we're going to walk. Yeah, we have to walk up this hill to this hut. We get to this hut, this location. The first night, kind of weird. We just actually we get put into groups. This is a weird mind game. They put you into groups, but the groups that they put you in are groups of people that are actually like your good. Most of the time, interesting, I didn't get with my good friend. But you get put in groups of people you actually like, people you connect well to, and you go, oh, this is my group for the next 5 days. Okay, thank God, cha-ching. And you're so
Mhm.
stoked. No, it's a mind game. The next day they pay attention to who you don't interact with, who you don't get along with, who you're not paying attention to, and you get put in a group with all those people the next day starting.
Oh
So
gosh.
it's just a mind game. But then you just play these weird like team leadership games, right? We're talking like, oh, don't communicate, but you all got to get through the spider web of string, and like, oh, we got to roll the, all the typical camp leadership style games that are totally fine. And so we're actually going,
Right.
this is kind of weird. We're all terrified, but like, oh, this isn't as bad as we
Not
thought.
bad.
I can handle
Yeah.
this for 5 days. Yeah, I hate weird leadership camp games, but okay. Um, but no, then they put us all in a circle, and one by one, the staff takes everything out of our bags, and we get confiscated. Anything that was in our bags that wasn't allowed to be in our bags. So that's
Mm.
insane already. This big power dynamic, fricked up embarrassment thing where someone's ripping everything, counting your underwear. One, two,
Mm.
three. Okay, yeah, you have the right amount of underwear. Oh no, Joe took too many pairs of underwear. Oh, that's too many bras for the week, Joe. Okay, take it away. And they take it. And they
Wow.
just say to you, you will be punished for these things at the end of the week. But you don't know what they are. So they say if you want them back at the end of the week, you'll be punished before you get them back. But
Oh
you don't
my
know
God.
what your punishment's going to be yet. So it's like freaky, scary, humiliating, embarrassing, weird. Then the
Mhm.
whole like worship night happens, and we're in a group, we're giving a big speech on commitment. And so commitment to God, commitment to the Lord, commitment to Jesus Christ, how God calls us to commit, like a big long sermon. And then that's when they lead us into a circle. And we have to agree to commit to the next 5 days. And so you have to literally, oh, and that's the whole thing too. They don't tell you what's going to happen, right? And so they said, but that's the work of God. God is committing and giving our life to Him without knowing what He's going to want us to do. And so
Right.
we all have to boldly and stand the circle like a freaking cult circle and say, I commit one at a time as we walk into the circle. Um, and I remember being like, I still to this day, and clearly in my head was like, this is like a cult. Like, this is really
Wow.
weird. Like, and me saying in my head, what am I committing to? I remember thinking, what am I committing to? What am I committing to? Like, and so
Mhm.
there we went into that. And then we got put into two groups between those who identify as male and female. And I'm going to say male and female in how YWAM did it, because in YWAM, gender is black and white. There is no
Right.
other. Yeah, it's very, there you go. And so boys got one group, girls got the other group. We had to make our shelters. And so you had two tarps and then a bathroom tarp. And so you had to make a shelter for sleeping and then a shelter, like a bathroom area. And then we did that, and you had 10 minutes to do it, big timing between the boys group and the girls group. Once it was done, us girls group, kick ass fucking shelter. I can't believe it. I just want to say, if you are stranded in the wilderness, call on the women. Best shelter I've ever seen. The men's shelter, god damn it, like on a slant, down a hill, like how's anyone supposed to sleep? You just like roll in your sleeping bag. It's like a slip and slide, okay? Like, it was a nightmare. And so we're all like, man, thank God that we made a good shelter, until they say God gives His very best things to each other. You have to switch. So we
No.
have to sleep in the male's shelter for the night. I'll let
No.
you know later that we only slept like not that long, but the whole night it was actually, I just want to let you all know, it was like a slip and slide. It was girls just like getting in their sleeping bag, trying to sleep at the top, everyone sinking down, pile on the bottom, people coming back out, trying again. Panic attacks, people crying, it was
Wow.
pouring rain, while the men just slept in their nicely built thing that we created.
Oh my
That night
gosh,
as
I would have
well, we have to
laid.
establish, yeah, isn't that insane? That same night, we have to establish NIKO government. Okay, so they get us in a circle, and we have to decide what the rules are. The rules have to be based on leadership. Where are the other ones? I have it written here what the three are. They were on leadership. Where is it? The rules. I can't even see them. Whatever. Okay, so they had to. There's three rules. They had to be on leadership, though. Uh, being on time. Oh, and respect. Sorry, leadership, respect, and on time. And then see, we had to make rules, and then it was and then you had to make up punishments of what those rules were. But you had to decide it for yourself. And so it was insanity to us. And then they also gave us specific rules that they would make for us too. So one of those rules was you were never allowed to be like outside of sorry, I'll say it a different way. You always had to be within 6 feet of another individual. You could never be outside of
Oh
6 feet
my,
of another individual. So you never had isolation, never got to be by yourself. You could never be alone. Okay. Never. So
wow.
never could be within that distance. If you did, you were punished. The punishments later on, what we discovered was like sit-ups, push-ups, running, all physical shit. Um, that's what our group decided on. I remember not giving a shit about this. I'm like, why are we creating a government? And why are you guys fighting around what punishments we should be giving ourselves? This is fucked up.
That's
Can't we
like
just say
Lord
no
of the
punishment?
Flies shit. Like that's
It was.
crazy.
Yes. Like insanity. And I remember in that argument arguing with people being like, why can't we just decide there's no punishment? If we decide our punishment, why can't we just decide that there's no punishment?
Right?
And they were like, no, that can't work. And I'm like, I remember being like, what do you mean that doesn't work? We're deciding. Like, and then a bunch of like
Hmm.
males in our group being like, no, we need punishments. Like, God damn it. And so all these punishments, another rule is that you couldn't ever trample or rip or destroy a piece of God's creation. So if you pulled the stick off the thing, or you broke a stick, or you pulled a leaf off, or you trampled a plant, you have to do 500 push-ups. And remind you that we are in the Costa Rican mountains full of abundance, like
For
banana
cracking the
plants.
stick?
Yes. But also, you know
But
what it really was? It was the fact that we are surrounded by abundance, by fruit, by vegetables, by
Mhm.
bananas growing, by plantains growing, and they wanted to starve us. And so that made us not be able to eat anything that was growing around us. So like
Wow.
surrounded by abundance, but cannot touch any of it. And so those insane. Yeah.
Oh
Like
my
in
God.
sanity. Yeah. So then all these other rules, if you left anything around, you also had punishment. So you could never leave anything because like it's not God's job to pick up after us. That's their own jobs. And so that's where that started. And then, yeah, that night we all go to bed. And that's when it's pouring rain. It's crazy. And then at 3 a.m. in the morning, and again, no one has clocks, no one has time, but they tell us what time it is. So who knows actually what time it was? But they said it's three. Scream, waking up. Everyone. It was like I thought I was gonna die. I'm like,
Hmm.
what is going on? And they're like, you have 10 minutes to pack everything up and to get into the vans, and no one's allowed to talk. And so you're like, okay, it's pitch black, it's the middle of the night, everyone's crying. Like we're talking wailing. That's the only sound you could hear was people just weeping.
Oh
And
my God.
you get into the van, it's the middle of the night, they drive us for like an hour and they drop us off in the middle of a dirt road and they say, walk until you find us. It's pitch black.
Oh my
It's
God.
like, so there we are walking for hours. We walked until the sunrise and just kept on walking. My dear friend, bless her heart, told us the entire Lord of the Rings story, narrated the entire walk. So all you can hear is our dear friend
Oh
narrating Lord of the Rings as like 15, 20 other kids behind her are just weeping as they're
my
climbing in the dark.
God.
Like, um, and so we do that. We finally find them. Everyone is starving, right? We haven't eaten. And that morning we had, it's like a consistency of baby pablum, but it's square bananas. And so they would mash square bananas. It tastes kind of like the most tasteless starchy potatoes you've ever eaten. And then they just
Mhm.
mixed water in it. And so it was like watery baby pablum that we had for breakfast. Which like at that point you'll eat anything. You just
Right.
walked for like 4.5
Mm,
hours, like, but also
calories. Yeah.
and you don't know when you're gonna eat again. Like,
Right.
and then after that we had to start. They told us go get your running gear on, and now you have to run. And we pretty much had to run the entire distance we had just walked. I don't know if it was 6.2 miles or 6.2 kilometers,
Oh my God.
and I don't know if it was one way or both ways. Again, because they told us the numbers, but cannot remember. But we had to run that entire way. All these kids who are not like most people aren't athletes, all different body
Right.
sizes, people that have like never don't run. You had to run to the very end, and once you got to the very end, there was a leader, and they gave you a whistle and a bag of baking soda, which I sarcastically named cocaine for the rest of the week, which got me in massive trouble doing multiple push-ups multiple times. But for the rest of the week, the new rule was that at all times you had to have your whistle around your neck and your bag of baking soda. Your baking soda was your toothpaste, and your whistle was never to be blown, but it had to be on your neck at all times. I do not
Wow.
still to this day understand the mind fuck around that or why that was the case.
Yeah.
Um, I think it was just another mind game. But if
Yeah.
you ever didn't have your toothpaste or your whistle on you, you had to do 500 push-ups. So again, insane. I remember being terrified at night when I slept because I was like, it's going to suffocate me. I thought it was going to choke me. So I remember holding it in my hand by my face so that like I wouldn't get caught with not
Yeah.
having it on me. Um, and so then that night, that morning, we're given this massive speech on giving up our rights. It's this whole sermon on Jesus and how we need to give up our rights. And then we get given a little food pack with our group. And so you're put in a group, I think, of like 4 or 5 different students, I think. I think it was four, yeah, 4 or 5 different students you're in a group with a leader. Um,
Mhm.
Leaders are useless. They don't do anything except stand behind you and tell you what punishments to do. But
Yeah.
they gave us our food kit. And so in our food kit, we had, I wrote it all down. So 1 cup of rice, 1 chicken noodle soup pouch, a can of beans, a sandwich, ziplocked size bag of like saltine crackers, um, a small Ziploc of granola, a small Ziploc of powdered milk, 15 granola bars. Holy shit, I'll just say granola bar on when you're not eating for 5 days. It's like heaven on earth, man. It's liquid gold. I'll never think of like, I can't even remember what I know that it looked like the granola bars, but I can't remember their name. But if I ever find them again, if I'm ever in Costa Rica, you betcha I'm finding those granola bars. And then a small bag of trail mix, and then a can of sardines. And so that bag of food would probably last one human 5 days in the wilderness. That'd be enough food for maybe one person in the wilderness for 5 days, what they packed us with, not for 5 people.
Oh, for
And so they tell you
everyone.
from the very beginning, like, we're not going to tell you when we'll give you food. We're not going to tell you what other food will be coming or if there will be food coming. You need to learn how to ration. You need to figure that out. And you need to make those decisions in a group. And it's the leader of the day that has the decision making power. And every day there's a new leader in your group. And so you don't just go eat something. I don't get to just be like, I'm starving. I'll go get a cracker. It's like, we got to vote. We got to make a decision. It's like, what day are we on? When will we be fed again? And so that was insane. Then after that, breakfast and after getting our food, then we go on a 6-hour hike, just with the compass and a map. Again, the leader is with us, but they can't say anything, can't speak to us, can't look at us. Like all they do is tell us punishments if we break rules. That's all they're there for. That hike was 6 hours. Interestingly enough, I now know, because I've had other people that I talked to, that some pretty traumatic things happened in those 6 hours of that hike that day, apparently, which probably makes sense because I don't actually remember that hike at all. I don't
Yeah.
remember anything about that hike that I did to this. And I have some notes written about it that are like, oh, okay, yeah, I was there. But I had no
But you
recollection
yeah.
of the hike
Yeah.
on day 2 at all. And I do know from my friends that some gnarly things happened that day. So yeah, fair enough now that my brain yeeted the memory out. But that's an interesting
Yeah.
thing to sit with. But yeah,
Yeah.
that night for dinner, we all of a sudden, I don't even, again, how do these chickens get here? Where did they find them from? I don't know. But every group got given a bundle of kindling. And we're told and then a live chicken, a whole live chicken. And we had to get our pocket knives out. Again, a bunch of like white kids who have never bought meat other than Fred Meyer in the frozen section. Like, come on here. And here we are in freaking Costa Rica making a tiny little fire. And then we have to, with our pocket knives that are dull that we've all bought from freaking Walmart in the States, like, have to butcher a chicken. No running water. No
Oh
idea
my
how to do it. No safety things.
God.
Nothing.
Oh,
Everyone has to be present for it. You can't avoid it. You can't leave. You have to be a part of it. And then you have to
oh,
butcher the chicken, get all the meat off, pluck the feathers, and then cook it.
oh
And
my
then
God.
after we are done cooking it, again, God gives his best things to his children, and you have to switch with another group. Our group, we cooked our chicken. The group beside us, not cooked chicken. So I remember us
Oh,
sitting there deciding whether we would get salmonella or whether we would just not eat that night. And I took one bite and then decided, no, it's not risk me. I'm not risking getting sick and dying. So I'm just not
yeah.
going to eat. So most of our group did not have any. All we had to eat that day was that baby pablum soup in the morning.
Wow.
So then you go to bed. And so we go to bed that night. It was freezing. We're in the mountains. I Googled
Yeah.
last night how cold it can get in the Costa Rican, like higher up mountains in December. It can get as low as 10 degrees Celsius, which I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but not warm to be sleeping in a freaking just
No.
out in the wilderness. Again, you can't go without 6 feet of people. So can we just imagine a simple detail is that no one no one has pooped in 2 days because you can't go to the bathroom
Yeah.
unless you take another person, and no one has
It's
the
gonna poop in
wherewithal or
front
the
of
decency
Yeah.
to go poop in front of a random person they don't know. So
Right.
like everyone's actually feeling really sick too by these points, but you haven't really eaten, so you're not. It's like whatever. We go to sleep. That next morning, woken up again. You like have 10 minutes to wake up and get to the meeting area, and at that point, it's like you are heading out there. And we're late again, so there's your punishment. And then, everyone's forgotten their toothpaste and their whistle, which I called cocaine again. So then, punishment again. And
Oh
now we're
my God.
worshiping. And then it was like, okay, this is the longest hike you guys are going to go on. This hike is going to be anywhere from 18 to 24 hours. We don't know when you're going to get back. You guys are just going to have to figure it out. And that day we were promised that we got to refill our water, except then when we went to refill our water, there was no water. But I don't believe it for a second because all of the leaders had their basic needs met the entire time. So,
Right.
and that's the mind fuck. They all
Right.
slept either off site in like a hut somewhere, or
Yeah.
where we would sleep, we would have to sleep in the bushes and they'd be off site somewhere in a little tiny hut, or they had regular food all week. They had coffees in the morning. They had
Oh my
candy that they would
God.
eat in front of us. They had never ever ran out of water. But that day before our 24-hour hike that they were going to make us do, again, let's acknowledge that this is the same day that the other individual lost his life too,
Yeah.
at YWAM recently. But we go to fill up our water and they're like, oh no, the water wasn't turned on. The farmer at this place forgot. And it's like, why do you guys all have water? And so they just pretty
Yeah.
much say, like, you'll have to find water on the way and you'll have to make that choice of whether it's risky enough to fill up waters in the stream or not. Right. And so people are deciding, yeah, like,
I'm shocked
I,
that no one else has died doing this
that's,
because, like,
well, there was a girl on my team that was like, she had Crohn's, and I still to this day, like, oh, I can feel it in my stomach.
yeah,
As I talk about it, she was so ill.
yeah.
Um, I'd never seen someone throw up blood at that point in my life until the
Jeez.
jungle of Costa, or the mountains of Costa Rica, like horrific.
Yeah,
And so it's like, yeah, how did we all make it? I don't know. Um, but then you're told these instructions and you're going to head on to this hike. And, this is a day that I was a leader with my other teammates. We were both leaders that day, which is a nightmare in and of itself. And there's like all these different things. And there's all this fucked up shit about leadership, right? Being a godly leader, doing this, guiding, blah, blah, blah. But also you at the end of the day do get full, choice at the end because you are the one that got ordained today. And also all these weird fucks around like in the evening, this like fuckery of like having to give affirmation, and you would like go and have to give affirmation to your leader of the day, and then constructive criticism and tell them where you didn't see God active in their leadership style. And so that was really horrific too. But yeah, we get a compass and a few instructions again, and we're on this hike that they said could take us up to 24 hours. And again, like most horrific, awful thing ever. Like it was like I remember now. I didn't remember actually until a friend reminded me. Now I looked at my notes. I'm like, oh, it is there. But on that day, on day 3, we did have a near death experience on a hike. I don't have enough memories. Something. Yes, it was with there's a very large waterfall we had to scale, and someone had a pretty massive like fall on that waterfall. So that was insane. I remember us hiking, and said that we were hiking for Snicker bars, and that there would be a place where you'd find Snicker bars. And then after hiking for hours and hours and hours, we found out that our leader had the Snicker bars the entire time
oh
on
my
them,
God.
which is another mind fuck.
Yeah,
Also the day before, they told us that we had a massive speech, a lesson on a metaphor about a black door. And so they taught us this sermon, and they said there was this story of apparently there's back in history in a war, there's a massive firing squad. And there's a lineup of people, and the people got to either choose the firing squad or there was a black door. And they didn't know what was behind the black door, but they knew what was going to happen in the firing squad. They're all going to get killed. And so before they're all going to get killed, they gave them the option, do you want the black door or do you want the firing squad? And every one chose the firing squad because it was known. But the black door
yeah,
actually led to freedom. So that's the metaphor that they teach us the night before, okay? And so the whole analogy of like, we as Christians choose what we know, but we should have to choose what we don't
Right.
know. That's where, like,
Right.
and we actually have freedom in the unknown. And so go through the black door. And so one of the instructions in the day for that hike was that at some point you will find a black door. Go through the black door. Let's understand that there is a language barrier here. They said black door, they meant to say black gate. Okay, black gate.
Mm.
Our group, not me, but one of my other co-leaders that day decided that he was going to fixate on the idea of a black door in the hike. And so they decided that the entire day they were looking for a random black door in the Costa Rican wilderness because they thought that if we found the black door, we would get to have freedom from NIKO and get to be done and be over with this. And so
Wow.
they thought that it was a play on words. And so we spent the entire day aimlessly looking around the Costa Rican mountains for a random black door that they thought they were going to find so that they could
Wow.
fully be done and get out of their misery, which only shows how desperate all these kids are, right?
Yeah.
Why would, like, the audacity of us to actually think that we're going to find a black door randomly in the Costa Rican mountains in the middle of nowhere, and that's going to get us out of this hell. And so we're willing to spend our
Yeah.
entire day doing that. Like, which there was no black door. It was just a black gate in a farmer's field that we had to go through. That's all it was.
Oh my.
And so same thing, get home that night, everyone's dead, tired, everyone's like, I remember the horror of that night. And that night, again, we had baby pablum, it wasn't baby pablum, it was that like square banana soup thing, but that's what we had for dinner after that long ass hike. And they said we could eat some of our stuff if we wanted from our own little kit. And I don't remember, I think we all shared saltine crackers that night maybe, but I can't remember. And so then we debrief at the end of the night. You encourage your leaders. Everything's great. Everything's done. And then you go to bed again. And then the next day, same thing. Wake us up. We're late, so punished. And then the whole talk is on servant leadership and us being servants. And so we pack up again. Oh, I forgot that on night 3, we're all going to sleep and a kid looks up and above us is the most massive boa constrictor one has ever seen above all of our heads. And so we
Oh
had to all get out of there as two of the men came and caught and released in the frickin' wilderness a massive. So you think anyone slept on night 3?
nope.
I've never seen such a
That is
massive snake in my life.
the
Like,
scariest thing I've ever heard.
yeah, and they said that even to us. And that I think, and I don't even know at this point, were they being serious or real? Were they just amping up our fears? Because they were like, holy shit, that would have killed someone tonight. Like, of course they didn't
Yeah.
swear. They probably said like, good golly. Actually, no, that's probably too much of swearing. So maybe, oh my. They just probably said, oh my, some of you almost died tonight. Like, and that was like, oh, what, for real? Like, yeah, thank goodness that Johnny spotted that. Well, he was falling asleep. Like,
Yeah.
so don't sleep. So day 4, we wake up. We're talked on servant leadership, all this other bullshit and weird shit that has to happen. And they bring us to a farm, a random farm on the hillside, middle of nowhere. And they say, we are going to help this farmer for the day. You guys have to work. Day 4. Okay. No one's really eaten, drinking. We're all exhausted. No one slept. And now we have to do farm
Manual
chores in
labor.
30-degree
Yeah.
weather in the Costa Rican like wilderness for someone we don't even know on a farm that actually looks deserted. And to this day, I'm convinced there was not it's a
There's
deserted
no help.
farm.
Yeah.
We did nothing. So that was the first day that I actually broke rules. So I remember that
Yeah.
day I left my group and I hid. I don't know what bushes they were, what trees they were, but I hid in some bushes by myself and ate food off these farmers' bushes or plants, whatever they were, I remember, and just wept. Um,
Wow.
and then we got to do, oh yeah, whole feet washing thing happens again. Then we are told to put on our bathing suits, which for girls, that was obviously a one piece with shorts on and the
Mhm.
shorts had to be a certain length. Men could wear whatever they want. And we had to have bucket showers. And so they led us to a stream that could have covered our whole bodies, a stream that we could have fully been immersed in, but we only got to fill up one bucket for our group in the stream and then wash all of our bodies with that one bucket. And then we got to have 2 minutes timed each of time in ankle deep water if we wanted. And then after that, we had to let our base leaders our leader of that week wash our feet, do a certain intimate, super beautiful, and like, they had to give us a gift of like washing our feet and blah, 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 blah. which like so in my opinion actually abusive. Don't harm
Yeah.
me for 5 days and then make you yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
And then this is where the horror is like insanity, the big kaboom. Obviously, knowing that left out so many other details as well, but this
Mhm.
is when they then lead us. They around like a goat at some time, a little like a baby goat appeared at some point in the day. Was it a goat? A lamb. It wasn't a goat. Was it a lamb or a goat? Doesn't matter. Same kind of animal, same meh, awful noise. Whatever. An animal appears, and we are told that we have to. They give us all blindfolds, and we have to hike, leading this lamb with us to this next spot. Okay? So imagine all these kids bawling, crying, walking, blindfold, as you just hear like, meh, meh, like this baby will go. We bring it all the way there. And that night, then we get there with the goat there with us the whole time. We have a massive speech on God and how Jesus like sent, no, how God sent Jesus and Jesus was the lamb and the lamb was slaughtered and the lamb was slaughtered for like our sins and as a sacrifice for us. And Jesus is the ultimate sacrifice. And so as a representation
No.
for that whole thing, they hung the animal
No.
from the rafters
No.
and we as students had to butcher it.
No.
No
I
one had
knew
any
I had,
idea.
as soon
Yeah.
as you said baby animal, I was like, nope, I know exactly where this is going.
Yeah.
No.
Horror. No one knew how to butcher an animal humanely.
Oh,
Okay, this is a bunch of 18-year-old children in the wilderness. They wouldn't do it. We had to do it, and everyone had to watch. You weren't allowed to leave. You weren't allowed to look away. It was we had to stand in a circle, and that thing hung in the circle from us. And one random kid finally agreed to do it because no one else would with a massive machete. And then we had to eat that animal for
stop.
the feast in that evening. And what's crazy is you haven't eaten really at all in like 5 days. So everyone is so starved. But then they say to you, you have to eat and don't eat too much because literally your stomach could explode. You cannot eat that much food. You don't have a big enough stomach for it. And so they make you the biggest feast of your life, but it's a mind fuck because you're starving, but you also just watch this like baby lamb get fucking murdered in front of you. You're devastated.
Right.
You're traumatized. And now the food is all ready, but you can't really eat it because you're sick. And I knew multiple people who threw up that night because
Wow.
people
Yeah.
are so full, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
and then, yeah, that night again, you have then you have that whole feast, that whole ordeal. And then like, everyone's fucked. And we end up going to
God.
sleep that night. I don't remember where we slept. But that was a really weird thing. So everyone goes to sleep, and then what they did is they snuck in and took different students out, tapped them on the shoulder, and they got taken out for specific special affirmation and special treatment that night. And they got to go elsewhere. And so it was this actual massive mindfuck mind game around like, why am I not chosen? Why is someone else chosen? What did they get chosen for?
So
And then
weird.
when they came back, they weren't allowed to tell us what happened, why they got chosen, but they just were allowed to tell us that they got like a special treatment, like something good happened to them. But we weren't allowed to
Wow.
know. So then it was like, what the heck, right? And so that
Yeah.
next morning they wake us up, and that morning then they go and they bring us all of our confiscated items, and we have to do push-ups for all of the items in front of the whole group in order to get our items back. We have another teaching, obviously, a bunch of worship. And then they, yeah, toss us the friggin' like beautiful certificate, and they gift you a switchblade, like
Wow.
for a bunch of 18-year-old kids in the
Yeah.
wilderness. The only thing I was mad about when I got the switchblade was realizing that they had these switchblades on them the entire week, and we had to butcher chickens with tiny pocket knives. That's what I remember being so mad about. Like,
Ugh.
you freaking idiot. So, yeah, that was like, that was it. And then you go home. And then, well, not home, you go back to the base. You hop in the vans, and
Yeah.
your outreach begins. And yeah, like
That sounds so traumatizing. And like you said,
Yeah.
like I could see how someone, especially like in some of these Christian traditions, would listen to that and be like, "Yeah, like sounds great. Sounds like
Yeah,
exactly
makes sense.
what you could like put yourself through, and sounds like a great metaphor and like whatever." But I think anyone with informed consent would find that very traumatizing. And so when you
Yes.
take away the information and like you don't even know what you're doing or why, and then you're just put into all of these mind games, it's psychological
Yeah.
torture and
That
physical torture.
the
And
entire time.
yeah, and no one should have to be put through that, period. Like
Ever.
whether you agree to it or not,
Or
but you
not.
guys don't even get the opportunity to even know what you're about to deal with.
It's that's what's crazy, right? It's like, and then can't ever talk about it again. The second you leave
Right,
the mountainside, you never can talk, not even with each other. And so it's like,
right.
you're just like,
'Cause
you
you
can't
can't
even
even
figure out if
process
it was
it.
okay or not. Yeah, because it's
Right.
like, and I remember leaving being like, am I fucking crazy? What's wrong with me? Because that was the most traumatic, horrifying 5 days of my life and something so very wrong.
Yeah.
But everyone's just going back to their lives. Like, am I okay? And there were some people who were like, that was great. Like literally there were some people on our trip that was like, wow, what a cool thing. I can't believe I made it. We survived. Look how we trusted God. Look how we're well equipped for outreach. And so it was also this like, oh my God, that's why I am a bad Christian. I do hate leadership. I can't obey. I chose the wrong outreach. If I would have obeyed and gone to Thailand, I would not be this fucked up. Like, I deserve this. Or the only reason I didn't like it is because I'm disobedient. Or the only reason I
Right.
didn't like it is because I actually am not that good Christian kid. Right? It's like,
Right.
it's disgusting actually, but of course
Right.
that's where we go. Right? And I think it's hard too because I toil this line. Obviously, I just shared with you, right, what happened,
Mhm.
and it's a large overview, right? I have notes in front of me. I have
Mhm.
15 pages of notes that I went through, and only talked
Yeah.
probably on like two of the points per each day when there's a million horrific things. And where I'm at in my story is realizing that I don't have to convince everyone how bad it was, right? Like
Right.
I know
It was
that that
bad.
was
Yeah.
horrifying and traumatic and malicious. And I know that
Yeah.
it actually has created horror for me. And I know it's actually killed people. That's not a lie. And
Yeah.
so I know that. And so I actually don't have to share every intimate detail of what happened to
Right.
me to prove to the world that what happened to me was malicious and harmful. And so
Hmm.
that's an exercise that I'm practicing in my life as well of like, you know what? I'm not on the defense anymore. I am
Yeah.
not on the defense anymore. All I am is an adult that is healing and moving forward, that is telling her own story that she owns,
Yeah.
so that other people hopefully get to have consent in the things that they do
Yeah.
moving forward. That's what I'm doing. And so,
At the very least. Yeah.
yeah, like, and
Yeah.
it's a lot more about my healing actually than it is about saving the
Hmm.
world. It's just about now
Yeah.
showing up in my own truth and my own narrative, right?
Yeah.
And although I want to defend things sometimes and I want to say, like, let me show you my journal. Let me show you every detail. Let me cross and
Right.
analyze it with everyone else. I'm going, no, that's actually a trauma response that I've carried for far too long. And
Yeah.
yeah, I get to share what feels good and ready. And people can make opinions on that. That's okay.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
I love that. I love you being able to walk us through what that like that thought process for you. I think it's
yeah,
really helpful. Thank you guys so much for listening to Amanda's story, part one and part two. If you haven't listened to part one, go back and listen to it. Go back on the podcast, No Culty Vibes, wherever you can listen to podcasts to hear another YWAM story and some more information about YWAM in general, and I will have more stories to come. I hope this story was helpful for you to hear, as if you're someone who has been considering YWAM, if you know anyone who has been considering YWAM, but mostly if you are someone who has been through a YWAM experience that has been incredibly difficult. I hope that you know you're not alone. And for anyone else who has experienced a cult like environment or any kind of coercive control, I hope that if this resonated with you at all, you know you're not alone. And there are people who have experienced things that you've experienced that have been there. You're not crazy. You're, like, there are other people that have been through this too, and there is hope moving forward, and there are communities that you can be a part of. So please reach out to me if you need help finding those communities. Please reach out to me if this episode spoke to you, if you want to share your YWAM story. If you have questions, if you want to know more about YWAM or more about cults, again, please reach out at the.cassiemarie on Instagram is the best place to reach me. I'm also on TikTok at the.cassiemarie. There will be so much more to come, so please be sure to like and subscribe wherever you are listening and watching. Thank you guys so much, and see you next time on No Culty Vibes. Bye.